Hello and welcome. My name is Ajaxpost, and today we're asking the question, is it worth it? And in particular, is Norman's Great Illusion worth it? It's a game released by a small independent team at the end of August 2019, depending on when you're watching this video. It's a simple visual novel, as you can see from the images we've got in front of us right now, in a very particular sort of retro pixel art kind of style. And let's just start off with how the game is described briefly by the developers. It's a visual novel where you have to live a year as an engineer in the face of social tensions, rising social tensions, and make difficult decisions. And of course the issue then is to live, or in some cases not live, with the consequences. And the game promises us 7 different endings, depending obviously on the choices you make within the game. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start the game off afresh and have a quick look at what it looks like, how it plays, and see if we're going to make a judgment on that against how much you might want to pay for it. So here we are at the very beginning of the game, and the first thing you hear when you start a new game is the buzzing of the alarm clock. And our man, presumably called Norman here, getting up, getting dressed for his first day of work. And he currently has a bank balance, which you can see at the very top of the screen, of $300. And he goes through a couple of conversations with his family, his wife and daughter. And you can see here very clearly the pixel art style of the game. And the one thing I found with this was the limitations of this home environment. Now, to be honest, I'm not really a visual story type of player. It's not the sort of game I would normally play. I go for more sandboxy, open-ended, do what you like kind of creative games where you can build the world yourself. This is very much a defined set of actions within the game, which is fine. It's telling a story, and it does give you some interesting choices to make, and it's quite compelling in the story that it's telling, which we'll get to in a moment. But I thought it would have been nice if they could have had, rather than just, as you can see there, the door outlined in white, or at the very beginning the wardrobe outlined in white, or the dining table outlined in white, as the only places you could go and the only points of interaction you have with the game. It might have been nice, for example, just to stop and talk to another member of the family independently. Just have a sort of random discussion based around the development of the storyline that you're playing through. Or things like, if you can see there, this is the child's bedroom over there on the left, perhaps to attempt to fix the bicycle, or try and pet the cat and be scratched, or whatever. The cat might run away. Just those tiny little sort of interactions outside of the storyline, perhaps, but just to give the thing a little bit more sort of engagement with the player. But beyond that, and the style, the art style that you can see here, and we'll see through the rest of the game, is fine. It's not something will stop here for a second. It's not something I'm particularly, fond of as such. I don't think, oh, retro pixel art, that's my kind of game style. I don't see that as a positive advantage. You might, but as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't detract from the game, because the game is what it is. It's the playing of the mechanics of the game itself, which is important in this sort of story, in this sort of product. It's not necessarily the style that it's presented in as such. And loads of people love playing these more simpler games, which don't have such demands on your PC, obviously, as well. So that's a good thing. Or it doesn't really matter. As in my case, it doesn't really matter to me. The art style is what I would politely term retro, but I know there are a lot of games that use this style and are very popular out there in the marketplace. Right, so right up front, in fact, you get this from the soundtrack, which you could hear underlying everything, and the buzzing of the alarm. It very much tries to bring you into Norman's life, but this is very much a politically oriented game. So if you find the politics of class and work, economics and social politics to be of no interest to you, or if you find that sort of conversation difficult to have, then this game probably isn't for you. Whatever the price of it, it's probably not going to be for you. So what you'll see as we go through this, there'll be these sort of pop-up boxes which give you various quotes, some of which are recognisable and famous quotes, and they just sort of, again, add to the flavour, the political flavour of the game. Beyond that, there are these mini games, and this is a sort of a driving thing where you just have to hit that bar in the middle of the square when it's green to avoid a crash. Now that took me quite some time to get the hang of, because I'm not a console player and keyboard games aren't normally my thing, so I'm not very quick off the mark when those things with those sort of things. I've played about 2 hours or more of the game now. I eventually got the hang of hitting the enter bar at the right point, the enter key at the right point, so that I didn't crash the car. Crashing the car is expensive, as we'll see when we get to the end of this particular segment what's going on there. Right, so the first mini game within it is the driving to and from the office or to the factory, and the second mini game is maths. You have this set of calculations presented to you, and you have to use the keyboard, the arrow keys, for example, to type in and press the enter key to actually calculate the sums and get them right or wrong. At the bottom there you see five lights. If you can complete the day with no more than 2 errors, i.e. red lit lamps, not lumps, then you'll get a bonus. I did it very occasionally, but some of the sums stretch my thinking ability. I'm not a great mental arithmetician. Is that a word? I don't know. Mental arithmetic isn't my forte, but you kind of recognise some of the sums after a while, so it's easy enough if you're quick to get these right. And if you do, you get a bonus. There are about half a dozen of these maths calculations to do in each part of the minigame, one before and one after lunch, and you can't get more than 5 wrong. If you can get 2 or less wrong, then you'll get a bonus. As you'll see, I don't quite achieve a bonus in this exercise. And then we come back to the driving home minigame, much the same as the first time round, and you try to avoid hitting something. And the thing there is to watch well, you shouldn't watch it, but the meter on the left-hand side tells you how damaged your car is. And once it reaches the top, it goes red, and you're then faced with a very large bill from the repair shop. Now, this is key, I think, to the progression of the game, is the savings. You don't have any, basically. And as you can see here, you're always spending more than you earn. And this, I suppose, kind of fits in if you're familiar with the Marxist understanding of economics. His first treatise and his first discussions on the role of the working class and the land-owning and production-owning classes, and so on and so on. So I'm kind of rusty on all that, but basically what this is trying to say to you, however much your boss gives you in wages, it's never going to be quite enough to cover all the spending. It's not strictly true these days, but back then it probably was kind of accurate, back when Marx was writing. So the thing is, even if I get a bonus, as hopefully we might see at one of these stages, I still can't get enough income to cover my outgoing. So I'm always losing money day after day after day. And of course, having to repair your car adds to that. So at the end of the day, we go back to the family and have another discussion. Now, the first 3 days of this, the discussions are pretty much the same. That you are just going in and out of work, and that's it. But when it comes to day 3, things change. Now, after 2 or 3 days, the choices start appearing. And this is one of the first ones. So after leaving our house in the morning, we see men with truncheons trying to beat up a middle-aged man on the sidewalk. You recognise him as a store owner from the neighbourhood, and you then have to make a socially conscious decision. You can either try and find a policeman, you can attempt to intervene in the beating, or prevent the beating rather, not join in obviously, or get in your car, ignore it and just drive to work. And these, obviously, each of those does have a different impact on your relationship with the boss, your neighbours, the police, the sort of the establishment, as it were, and so on. And they all work, which is rather, well, that's the whole point really of it, isn't it? In this one, I'm going to get in the car and drive to work. So I arrive at work on time, and that's all good. Another example of the questions that come up in this, the decision-making process, which is the whole point of the story, really. The employees have declared a strike. They demand improved working conditions, largely because the new contracts we've got from the government mean an increase in the working hours, more work to do, the pay isn't improved and so on. So it's kind of a typical social decision to make, a social economic decision to make. And you can either support your colleagues, sort of the engineering supervisors and managers and so on, and inform your superiors about who is rabble-rousing, if you will, within the factory, or you can support the employees' demands for better working conditions. And if you support the employees' demands, the authorities might compromise, of course. They might give in to the demands, but you will now be on a blacklist, which could have an impact on how the rest of the game plays out, the rest of the story plays out. So each of those decisions you make impacts on the family and the conversations you have, and whether your wife supports you or not, and so on. So it builds in that sort of relationship, so you know what's going on there. She may, of course, not be on the same side as you when it comes to these social, political, economic decisions. But that's all part of the fun of it. So you go back to bed at the end of each day after a meal with the family, retire for the evening, only to be waken rudely again by that accursed alarm clock and the need to dress and get back to work. Each sort of game day isn't actually a real day as such. It obviously moves forward by weeks and months, so it's not a whole 365 days in the year. It sort of skips forward to pertinent points in the history. One thing you will notice here is that the backgrounds do change slightly, so the leaves are now turning into autumnal colours, and when we get into winter it all goes white, and in fact the town you drive through on the way to and from work actually has a kind of wintry, icy, snowy kind of look, although thankfully the difficulty of the car driving minigame doesn't get any more difficult. And of course there are even more questions to ask. The social tensions are rising, more difficult questions to think about. What do you do? And of course it's not just you that suffers, the rest of the town might suffer as well. And notice here our lovely, snowy, wintry town as we drive through it. Finally, all your money runs out. Now, it's possible if you get a promotion, you might actually earn more than you spend. I've not got that far, but eventually, if you don't get the promotion at least, you will always run out of money. But will that be before the end of the year or not? Depends how good you are at those little mini-games. And notice the tensions arisen not just in society as a whole, but within the family. So we are no longer actually sitting down to a meal. So things are getting difficult. It's kind of a shame that, again, there's no sort of other interactions in this. You just get that sense of isolation, which is fine, fair enough for the story, but it'd be nice for the wife or the child to say, Daddy, you're not doing good. Something's going wrong. Just a quick look around the rest of the house. There you are. Again, unfortunately, there's nothing much you can interact with apart from the key objects at that stage, that stage of the day. And having run out of money, you wake up, get dressed for work. You see, I'm getting quite close to the end of the year, but I didn't quite make it. It's Christmas! So little touches, little nods to the time of year, which is nice. You always have breakfast, so you don't always have the after-work meal. You don't have the evening meal. Maybe that's because you're running out of money. That could be the logic for that. And notice here how difficult the conversations are starting to get. It's about shopping, it's surviving, battles, all those little things you have to deal with in a time of social tensions and uprising and disturbances. So having woken up with no money in the bank, there's one final set of questions that I've been asked. Again, if this is different, if you've got a promotion or whatever, I couldn't tell you at this point. I've not been that successful. So your savings will be drained soon. I think they've already run out, to be honest. So desperate times call for desperate measures, and we are given 4 options here. Now, in the early days, in the first 3 days or so of going to work and coming home, all of these have led to me not surviving at all. They've been very downbeat endings. There's one which has a slightly different end earlier in the storyline, but as you can see, I've been reasonably successful. I've survived almost a year, so I'm going to be, although it's kind of counter to what I've been playing the character as up till now, but I'm going to sign up for the volunteer police squad. So I've successfully undergone selection procedure, I've got my new uniform and a decent salary. That's good news, could do with a decent salary, and you've always loved having order in the streets and you easily mastered the job. However, you're then asked the question, and this could happen obviously in a real situation of social and civil disturbance. Your squad is given the order to disband a rally, a workers' rally in this instance, that have been blocking tracks for 3 days, and the protesters demonstrating extreme intransigence. One thing I will say here, I think I've spotted just one, perhaps two, spelling errors or inadequacies in the use of the English language. The team aren't an English team. I believe they're Russian, but I might be wrong on that. So kudos to them. The English is really kind of up to the mark. So just one small spelling error I think I noticed in the entire storyline that I've gone through so far. So your squad is given permission to use any means necessary and you're ordered to open fire. What do you do? Open fire, fulfilling the order, or do you say no, we can't shoot our own people? In this case, I fulfill the order. And that's it. The end of the story for me at this time. And I think either choice will end the story. Again, it depends, I think, how far you get within the game. So my eagerness allowed you to earn the respect of the military command. So I got kudos from my superiors in the police and the military forces. However, war then broke out inevitably as a result of the civil disturbances, and I was able to go to a relatively safe sector at the front with the rank of officer. During the war, I managed to do enough to receive appropriate recognition. So I think that's basically my survival, which is kind of good. And that's it. That's the end of the story as I played it. There are 7 different endings. I've so far seen 5 of them, I think. But the good thing is it is kind of a game I wanted to go back and play through again to see if I could get to the different endings, if I could improve my abilities in the mini games. I think I've got the driving game more or less sussed, but the maths, again, I still struggle with at times. The amount of time you've got to do it in can be quite challenging for the more awkward number combinations. But that is the nature of work on a production line, perhaps. It is that grind, that incessant process to get things done and out the door. So, the game. Can we call it? Can we make a judgment? So, Norman's Great Illusion. Is it worth it? Let's have a look at some of the plus points here, I think. The soundtrack. I really like the soundtrack. It really has a good mood setting ambiance to it. The relentless buzzing of the alarm clock really gets into your head. That's all good. The look of it, again, I'm not a great fan of retro pixel art kind of stuff, but it works here. It's fine. I'm okay with that. The story is what this game is all about. If you're a real fan of the pixel art style, then obviously that's going to be a tick for you. The mini games, they're kind of challenging. They don't stretch you a great deal in terms of thinking and planning and strategy, but dexterity is a good thing, like the driving game here, and they do make you think. Do kids still actually learn maths? I don't know. If they do, that's good. They should get through that game. If not, then perhaps they should. So that's quite good. I like that. And the decision making. It does really seem to work. After the first 2 or 3 days in the game, the decision making does impact on the storyline. But against that, it is all kind of rather linear at points, and I would like more variety, certainly in the home, to be able to sort of go a little bit beyond the game and explore the relationship within the family a little bit more. Although it's rather simple, as you can see, in terms of design and the little mini games within it, there is a kind of compulsion to it. that you want to get to one of the other story endings and find out what all the choices actually are. But I liked coming back to it, and it was a good sort of 20-30 minute blast just to try and discover different routes through the game and what the different effects each choice would have. The negatives, if you're not into the politics, then avoid this. You're going to be offended and annoyed by the game. And it is kind of simplistic in that sense, in terms of what you're actually doing. That was by design. That's what they wanted to emulate. But that may or may not annoy the heck out of you as well, is that simplicity of the mini-games and the challenge as a game. But it is a visual novel. It is a story, and that's the focus of it. So, where are we? What does it cost? In the UK, it's retailing at £2, thereabout. In the US, I think that equates to $3. So it's not exactly an expensive game. And that's it. Is that amount of gameplay, that amount of story, worth that small amount of money? I don't pay big bucks for a game. I very seldom buy a game at full price. And to be honest, I didn't pay for this game. I was lucky enough to receive a key from the developers to have a look at it and create a little bit of content on the game in terms of these YouTube videos. But notwithstanding that, I think it's a fair reward. You're going to get a good couple of hours or two out of this if you can get past the mini games. The driving one isn't too difficult. The maths one, you may or may not struggle depending on how good your calculation ability. That's not a word. I'm going to make it up. How good your ability to calculate is in your head, and how quick you are on the keyboard, because it is an entirely keyboard focused game. But if you can get around that, then I think there's a fair challenge here. I think it actually does what it's set out to do. And in general terms, I'm going to give this one, a bit of a thumbs up. If you're okay with the storyline, if you like the pixel art graphics, then go for it. £2, $3, that's not bad. For the amount of entertainment you're going to get out of it, I think Norman's Great Illusion is worth it. If you've enjoyed this Is It Worth It video, the first one I've done, if you'd like me to do more, of course, just make a note in the comments box below. I'm not a great one for reviewing games, but it could be something we could do together. You suggest, I comment. You comment back, and we'll engage in conversation over the quality of the games we're playing. Alternatively, if you've just enjoyed this, got something out of this video, click the thumbs up. A like would be very much appreciated. And of course, if you've not already done so, why not subscribe? That way you'll know when I upload another one of these or any of my other videos. So from me, Ajaxpost, here with Norman's Great Illusion, worth it. I'll see you again soon. Until then, bye-bye for now.